everybody. Welcome to the Jerusalem Connection Red Alert Report. I'm your host, Amy Zawi. Today we have returning to the program Paul Calvert, a UK journalist who has been residing in Israel and its surrounding areas for over 20 years and currently lives in Bethlehem. Paul, welcome to the program. We have a lot to talk about today.
It's good to be with you today.
So, Paul, we have seen a lot of maybe not quite correct or complete reports in our news cycles here in the West, here in the United States, explaining or trying to say that the Christian population in Israel or other areas that are surrounding Israel is being persecuted and oppressed, and it's all Israel's fault. What I'd really like to hear from you today, as a Christian who lives in Bethlehem and has been there for several years now, what is really going on and what are the causes of the problems that might be affecting the Christian community? We'll talk about Bethlehem and its areas and maybe some of the other areas like Israel proper versus Gaza, since everybody sometimes lumps them into one big category. Maybe you can break it down for us.
Yeah, the whole issue of Christianity here in the land is a little bit confusing. And basically, in some ways, you've got like two countries. So we've got here in Israel, the Christian population in Israel is growing. And the Christian population can actually go and do whatever they want. They can travel the country, they can meet and have worship meetings and things like that. They can go to Nativity Church, they can go to their own churches, they can do whatever they want and have all that freedom living in Israel. Now, then on top of that, you also have Palestinian Christians who live within the Palestinian Authority. Now, they don't have as much freedom as Israeli Arabs that live in Israel itself. So it is a little bit difficult if you're a Palestinian, but every year you get permissions to go to Israel. You get an Easter permission and you get a Christmas permission. And a few years ago, before COVID, you got permission. Basically, your permission ran so long, when the one had finished, the next one came in, and you were basically going to Israel all the time. But then, of course, COVID happened, and then October the 7th happened, and that made things different and completely changed it. But it is hard for the Christian community here in Bethlehem, because sometimes they feel like the Jews are against them, the Muslims are against them, and even some of the Christians are against you. You know, if you're a very Orthodox Christian here and you're personally an evangelical, well, they think the evangelicals are a cult, so they don't like you at all. So that can be very difficult as well. When they get permissions, the Palestinian Christians can go to Jerusalem and they can travel in Jerusalem and see the things in Jerusalem like anybody else. So that's important. That's good to know as well. It is difficult for them and it is hard for the Christian community. And particularly in Bethlehem, we are losing numbers. It is very, very sad. People get fed up every time there's a war that takes place and happens. People get fed up and they just decide to leave. I just found out just the other day, one of the school kids that I speak at one of the schools, he has left and he's gone to America now. I knew one person, they went to Belgium, but they came back again. And over the years, I do know many, many people who've actually left the Bethlehem area because they're just fed up with the situation. You know, in Bethlehem itself, unemployment is very, very big. And now it's even worse since October the 7th. So it's just a hard life to live here in Bethlehem. And sadly, because the Christians are leaving, the community is getting stronger and stronger. So what you need in some ways is a revival amongst the Muslims to keep if the Muslims get saved, we can start seeing those numbers go back up again. So so it is really hard and it's really, really tough for the Christian community within the Palestinian area, but within Israel itself, it's very good. You have all the rights of everybody else. If you're a Jew, you go to synagogue. If you're a Muslim, you go to the mosque. And if you're a Christian, you go to church. So they've got all the full rights as everybody else. And the numbers are growing as well. So you've got to understand that there is a difference between being an Israeli Christian and being a Palestinian Christian. And that's where the two things differ, really, in that way.
So that's pretty interesting. So once you understand that difference in leadership or governance over those two areas where these folks may be living, how can you correct the perception or explain the reality about what is causing those difficult conditions and the desire to flee? And I'm glad to hear that there is a mechanism to get out. Some Christians can't get out from areas where they're persecuted, but for the difficulties that Christians under the Palestinian Authority, the PA governance, if their lives are not as free and wonderful as the Christians that live in Israel, whose fault is that? What is the mechanism or the conditions going on? Because in the West, the perception is, well, that's still Israel's fault. Whether you've delineated between who's governing or not, the news cycles are, and certain commentators keep blaming it squarely on Israel. Now, maybe there are issues, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, that the Christians feel like the Jews are against them in the PA. But can you sort of break that down about what is the reality of what's causing these problems?
It's the situation, basically. On October the 6th, people were able to go into Israel and work in Israel. They had their jobs and everything. Tourism was really, really well. Tourism was up. I think we were having record numbers of tourism. And then suddenly, October the 7th happened. So then Israel closed the borders for many people, not just to Christians, but to Palestinians in general. And it was closed down for a while. So who's to blame? Is that Israel's fault because they closed the checkpoint? Or is that the Palestinians' fault because they've done the worst attack in Jewish history? And the same thing as well, Israel is surrounded by a wall. Bethlehem is surrounded by a wall. You have a wall and then you have a fence all the way around here. Now, I remember the days when there wasn't a wall. But I remember as well on one Passover night during the second Intifada, where a terrorist got into a hotel in Netanya. He blew himself up and 30 people were killed and about 140 people were injured. And in my own mind, I sort of think that was the time where they decided we need to build a wall. So who's to blame? Is Israel to blame for building a wall, or is it the Palestinians that are to blame? You know, there's the issue between freedom and security. If you have a wall and you allow people to come through and you can check people, which is what they do, there are still Palestinians today. They go through the checkpoint every single day and they work in Israel. Now, they've been checked. So when they go into Israel, do you not want to have security as well? If you're a Palestinian family and you've got permission to go into Jerusalem and you decide to go into McDonald's and your little child is sitting there eating his McDonald's and you decide to go to the toilet, and while you're in the toilet, a terrorist bomber comes in and blows himself up and kills your child. Well, wouldn't you have wanted the security to have done their job properly? To have caught this bomber, to have caught this terrorist? Of course you do. So the whole security situation protects everybody, but it also affects people as well. If we think of 9/11, when they flew the planes into the Twin Towers and into the Pentagon, I suffered after that because then they start checking me. You know, I can't have knives and forks on a plane anymore. I have to have these plastic things. You know, you can't go into the cockpit and sit with the pilot anymore. You know, you're not allowed to do that. You know, and all these things. And then, oh, you can't have liquids. If you have over 100 milliliters in liquids, they take it off you. And so many people left their water or their toothpaste in their hand luggage, and they took it off you. As well, that's not fair. But those are the rules, and that's the reason why they do that is because of security and because it's not fair on me. And that's sort of the same issue and the same situation here within the land. Israel has to protect itself, and the people who they're protected from are from Palestinians, which means you have to put security into place. The same thing as well, you know, oh, they stop ambulances. Ambulances being stopped. And if you get to the checkpoint, they swap over from a Palestinian ambulance into an Israeli ambulance. Isn't that terrible? That's terrible that they do that. But why? Because the Palestinians were actually putting suicide belts in the ambulances and driving straight into a place like Jerusalem. So everything that Israel does is for a reason, you know. And this is the thing. And sometimes you get things on TV and you'll see a situation happen. And I think it happened just at Easter last year when people were praying in Jerusalem and the Christian community were at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And something happened. And you see someone being dragged away, arrested by the Israeli police, maybe a Christian being arrested. Well, that is one instance. Something has happened that we maybe don't actually know why that policeman reacted in that way, but doesn't that happen all around the world?
Right.
Doesn't, don't you get a Muslim who shouts something nasty in London or in Vancouver? That doesn't mean that the whole Muslim population are so evil and we've got to hate them. No, there's one thing, one person has done something bad, and that's been the response. And sometimes, particularly when it's got to do with Israel, then the narrative goes out. People take this clip of the Christian that's been arrested in Jerusalem, say, "Oh, this is how they treat the Christian." No, no, no. This is one instance.
Right,
This isn't
right.
how they treat the Christians. This is just one instance that we don't know the context of, and the guy was arrested.
Right.
Well, maybe he was arrested for a reason. Maybe he was shouting racist things, racist abuse. Maybe he was doing this. Maybe he was doing that. Unless we know the reason why, how can we criticize that? And how can we say, oh, but this is how they treat Christians? So sometimes we need to learn to think about what we're actually seeing. Are we being manipulated to think something and to hate the Jewish people and to hate Israel because of something that's been posted on Facebook or posted on Instagram? So it's been very, very careful that we're not being manipulated in that way, because there's obviously a pro-Israel lobby that as soon as something happens, the pro-Israel group get all their things onto Facebook and say, this is what's happening, and they do that. But there's also the counter protest as well, where the pro-Palestinian lobby will also do exactly the same thing. We don't like Israel, so this has happened, so there's always a narrative that's always going out, a positive narrative and a negative narrative. And we just need to be aware of that. And we need to be also remember how to think within these situations that are happening and going on here in the land.
Right, right. So that's a good point. There's a hasty generalization that, okay, this one Christian in this one place, maybe he threw a punch, maybe he shouted
Yeah.
something alarming, and he got arrested. And that can happen anywhere. A criminal act can happen. But all of a sudden that clip is then taken and people will say, oh, Israel is a police state, when it simply has, normal policing in its
Yeah.
communities to keep everybody safe, as you mentioned. So,
Which is what
Paul,
would happen everywhere.
yeah,
And
exactly.
also as well, if we remember when the war took place, right at the very beginning of the war, I've always learned when something happens and Israel respond to something and it looks really, really bad, and you think, why did Israel do that? Give it a couple of days and see what transpires. And usually you find out exactly what transpires. So when they said, "Oh, Israel's hit the hospital," and all this sort of stuff, and 500 people have been killed, and then you find out after a few days later that it was I think, if I remember right, it was a misfired Palestinian rocket that landed in the car park, and there wasn't that many people that were killed.
That's right.
So that it will go out and it will send a lie all around the world. And then after a few days, you actually find out the truth. It wasn't quite what you were told in the first place.
That's
And
right.
so sometimes you can say, and you can be rightly frustrated and annoyed with Israel at something.
Hmm.
You can see something and think, why did they do that? I've seen something today that a Christian has been arrested and it's gone out. Oh, how bad that this Christian has been arrested. Well, first of all, why was he arrested? I don't know why. If he's got bombs in his bag, then yes, he should be arrested. If he's been arrested for no reason and been held, then that's something completely different. And that's not fair. But I can't really make my conscious decision to say I support this or I disagree with this until I know the facts. And you've got to really get to know the facts behind something and get to know the full facts before you can actually really give a proper and real opinion about a situation that's taking place here in the Holy Land.
That's a great point. And unfortunately, here in the West, our mainstream press has lost its journalistic integrity by running with those kinds of stories without all the facts. And so it behooves us as news consumers to be sure that we look at these things with suspicion and say, okay, something happened, a Christian was arrested, or a hospital had a bomb, detonates, or a missile fall on it. Let's get all the facts before we rush to a judgment. So, Paul, you're doing a great job explaining to us what the conditions are in Bethlehem and for folks under the Palestinian Authority, and your witness to that as you live and work there. What are your sources telling you about what's going on right now in Gaza amongst what's left of the Christian community in Gaza?
Well, the situation is very bad in Gaza, particularly for the Christian community. I would hate to be the Christian community in Gaza. And I really personally believe that once everything is sort of, there's a sense of more freedom, that a lot of the Christian community will leave Gaza and you won't have much of a Christian community left. But it is very bad. There are still some people living in the church. And I was quite surprised. So we've had over 2 years of war, and now some people are still there living in the church. Some people have returned to their homes, and when they've got to their homes, there isn't really quite their home left. So you might be living in a home, but it might be one room of the house because part of the house has been demolished. So you're able to sort of make some sort of a home in the other part of your house, in a bedroom that's still standing and things like that. But it is difficult because there's no electricity, there's no water. I asked my friend, he said the food prices are good, but there's certain things that have gone expensive, particularly over Ramadan. So I've just bought a tray of eggs. So there's about 30 eggs. I bought eggs today and I paid 20 shekels for them in Bethlehem. Now, if I was to buy them in Gaza, they would be 70 shekels.
Wow.
And a chicken is expensive. So, and obviously, of course, as well. So if the prices have gone really high and the people aren't working, they've got no money. So there's no money for the people. Of course, Hamas have their own food. They seem to be able to have their own food. I asked about the church. The church is still meeting on a Sunday, but it is very, very difficult. The streets are destroyed. So it's very, very difficult to get to church and walk to church. But one thing I did find out is that there are no Christians living in the tents. So they're either in the church or they've gone back to either what is their house or what is left of their house. So it is very, very difficult. So we do need to remember our brothers and sisters, our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Christ in Gaza, to be praying for them. And if you know of very good, legitimate Christian charities that want to help the Palestinian Christians there, then do feel free to help those people there because they need help. Those people here in Bethlehem need help as well because of obviously the situation. Bethlehem has struggled the most because of the war, because Bethlehem is built on tourism and tourists didn't come. So it's been very, very difficult for the people in Bethlehem as well. So both Gaza and Bethlehem have really struggled during the war times here.
And within each, the Christian population has been slowly declining. And I read some numbers recently that by October 7th, 2023, there was only less than 2,000 Christians in Gaza to start with, because there was a mass exodus between 2006 and 2023. And then after October 7th, somehow about 1,000 Christians had managed to emigrate out, I believe, through the Rafah gate area. I'm not sure the mechanics of all that. So the Christians that are left in Gaza are few, and they clearly are suffering, but they're also living for 20 years under a Hamas leadership and amongst a Muslim community. So they must have had some struggles, just some societal struggles already, even before the war.
Well, I've been to Gaza and I've visited Gaza a couple of times with Nashat Phileman, who is the head of the Palestinian Bible Society, and he has a real heart for Gaza. And he was able to go in for a while, but he hasn't been able to go in just for a long time lately. He took me into Gaza, and I got to meet some of the Christian community there. And we have our radio station here. The guy who works with me in the radio to do the news side, he is from Gaza. and I met his brother. Well, both of them are here in Bethlehem now, and I'm not sure exactly when they came. My guess is they came when Rami Ayad was murdered in Gaza, and I think that put a lot of fear within the Christian community. So Rami's wife and two children are actually in my church here in Bethlehem. My friend Fadi is here in Bethlehem. So there's quite a number of people from Gaza who came over here to Bethlehem, but they still have relatives in Gaza. So it's been a very difficult time for them watching and seeing the news and seeing, because people do get killed and it's not easy. It's war. And that's what happens in war. And that's what you've got to remember. So it is very, very difficult for the Christian community in Gaza. And it's also very difficult for the Christian community here in Bethlehem, watching and seeing what's going on in Gaza, and particularly for those people who've escaped. Some people were able to escape while the war was going on, but they had to pay about $5,000
Wow.
just to leave. So you've got, I'm presuming they had to leave through the Egypt border.
Mhm.
So there's Egypt exploiting the situation and charging people 5,000. No, it's a poor any area anywhere to start off with, and then you're going to charge people £5,000 per person to leave. That's extortion. So where is the compassion? Where is the thought for the Palestinian Muslim, Palestinian Christian living in Gaza when you're going to charge them £5,000, $5,000 just to leave the area? So there's been a lot of exploitation that's been going on there as well.
Well, that's a good point because Egypt is no friend to the Christian community in general. I mean, there was just a Coptic community in Cairo recently that was set on fire. I mean, there's a lot of persecution in Egypt amongst the, the the Egyptian Coptics. I mean, against the Egyptian Coptics. So Egypt is a little suspect on how much they're really trying to help. Like you said, they'd rather exploit. So, Paul, you've got a good insight on what's happening in the under the PA and in Gaza, and of course, you mentioned already that within Israel proper, Christians residing there, they maintain a very free they experience liberty, so to speak, in their everyday lives. So, as tell us about what's going on this month because we are having Ramadan, and in Israel, Muslim Israelis can practice their faith, and there's a bit of travel going on to get to Jerusalem and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we're recording today on a Friday. So today is their Muslim day where they go to Jerusalem. So that's the thing. Do not go to the checkpoint on a Friday because it's such a huge operation. They basically put extra barriers in place to move people through as fast as they can, to shove people through so that they get everybody checked and through the situation, through the barrier, and get them onto the bus. The bus fills up, that's it, stop, go. Then the next bus comes in, then it's filled up, then go, the next bus. And it's such a huge operation to actually get all of these Palestinian Muslims onto their buses and up onto the Temple Mount where they can pray. So there will be about 80,000 Muslims up on the Temple Mount today praying. And then sometimes in the evening, they have special prayers, and you can have about 180 to 200,000 Muslims praying there in the evening. So, there's many Muslims who will have permission at the moment to go into Israel. So these are Palestinians going into Israel and going to pray on the Temple Mount. And it's a huge, big operation to do it. And it takes place on a Friday. And I've actually been through on a Friday. So I've been through that system itself. And it's just basically meticulous, like an army operation to get everybody through and out. And of course, people want to go. It's Friday. It's their special day of prayers. That up on the Temple Mount is sacred for the Muslims, so they want to be up there and they want to be praying up there. And Israel allow them to go up there and to have their worship and have their Ramadan and have their very, very special time. So it is Ramadan at the moment in Bethlehem. They've got the Ramadan lights. So if you go into Manger Square, they've got this great big uh, lantern that is there. I've been up into Bethlehem Manger Square at like 6 o'clock in the morning when you get the beautiful light. and you can see all. Basically, it's the Christmas lights, but they call them the Ramadan lights. So they put some of the Christmas lights up, but then they've also decorated the mosque. So the mosque is decorated with all the lights. I mean, it looks beautiful, and particularly with the sky, when the sky is really blue early in the morning, it looks really, really nice. If anyone wants to see, if they scroll on my Facebook page, they can see the Muslim lights there, and it looks very, very beautiful. It's very, very nice indeed. So the lights are out there. The people dress their homes as well, and put lights on their homes. So it's a little bit of a difficult time because you've got to fast. Of course, Muhammad didn't fast for 30 days. Muhammad fasted for 10 days, but the Muslims don't know which days that Muhammad fasted on. So they fast 10 days before and 10 days afterwards. But they still eat. So they only fast during from sunrise to sunset. The rest of the time they eat. So as soon as the sun goes down, they're eating. And then, of course, sadly for the wife who has to get up and cook the meal, she gets up before the sun goes up and she'll cook a meal for the family. And just before the fast begins, so they'll all eat. So they're all ready, and then they'll have their fast. So it's fasting all kinds of things. So also fasting like cigarettes, which is very, very difficult because many, many, many people, I would say about 80% of the population smoke here.
Wow.
And if you've got like a 4-year-old child, you can give him some money. Oh, go and get me some cigarettes, son, and he'll go and he'll bring some cigarettes back. And we've also, if you see those claw machines where you put like a shekel in and the claw comes down and you get a toy, they even have a box of cigarettes in there amongst all the toys. So so many people smoke here, and it's just a cultural thing. It's a cultural norm, and you can see maybe even the cigarette companies out on the street trying to promote. And it's totally opposite of what we would have in England. You do not see cigarettes at all. You're totally discouraged from smoking. We even have cigarettes behind the counter, so you can't even see them now. And when you get that box of cigarettes, they've got so much warnings on them. And who can afford to smoke these days, anyways?
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. It's like
So,
burning
yeah.
your money,
And
but that's pretty
it's
interesting. But they're
it's
supposed to
expensive to
refrain
smoke.
from
Yeah.
smoking. They refrain from smoking from sunup to sundown so they can
Yeah.
smoke. Okay.
So they can't smoke. You're not really supposed to even
Yeah.
spit. Obviously, there's things like sex. You don't have sex and things like that, so you don't have food. So all of these things are partly to do with the fasting as well.
So you
So
get a lot of maybe irritable people walking around if they haven't had their coffee or their cigarettes during the day.
this is the thing. If you can't drink water, and obviously, of course, because it's February, this is one of the times where it's easier to do your Ramadan than it is right in the height of summer, when
The
the
days are
sun comes up
longer. Yeah.
so much earlier and it goes down so much later. Well, when you've got the shortest day of the year in December the 21st, that is actually the most ideal time to have Ramadan. So it
Shortest
shifts
days
every year.
possible. Yeah.
So it's not the same time every year, it shifts. So I think next year probably will be one of the easiest times to have Ramadan because the days will be so much shorter because it will be closer to that December the 21st. So today, at the moment, it isn't all that difficult to have Ramadan because the day is going to be finishing very, very soon, and people will be able to eat. But in the summertime, it's very difficult.
So how does the Christian community interact with the Muslim community in Bethlehem during this time? Do the Christians, out of respect, like not eat in front of them, or does it matter? I mean, is there any sort of friction between the two communities, or does
Well, you'll try to be respectful as much as you can. I still sort of I sort of sometimes I'll have like I was on the bus, was it yesterday, and I drank on the bus because it's sort of in a private area. Nobody told me off. Nobody said anything. Maybe if someone wanted to make an issue, maybe they would say, "Oh no, it's Ramadan." But if you want to eat and there's a restaurant open, you can actually go into that restaurant because you're eating in private.
okay?
So we did. I had a group came over from the US and we were in Bethlehem, and we suddenly realized, oh, it's Ramadan. But the restaurant was still open during the day. So we went there and we ate there. But you wouldn't take that shawarma and eat it out on the street.
Right.
And technically, you could be arrested if you'd done that. I think as a tourist, you probably wouldn't be arrested because Bethlehem's a tourist city. But if you were a Palestinian and you were eating on the street, then you probably would be arrested. and you could go to jail for a month for that and have a fine as well. So, you try to respect as much as you can. And if you wanted to have a drink, you'd maybe just go move to the side, have a quick drink, and then just carry on with your day. So you sort of try to be very respectful within that as well. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's not like a huge inconvenience for the Christian community, but they just have to be mindful that they could cause some strife if they.
Well, some of your shops actually might be closed. So there's a coffee seller right in Manger Square. So if I bought my coffee every morning, he's not open at the moment.
Okay.
Uh, and a lot of other shops, they're not open. They just close down over the Ramadan time. Some shops that sell food, they change, and they seem to be selling these little like pancake things. So this would be like the American type not crepes, but pancakes. They seem to sell them. So they make them during the day and people come and buy them. That seems to be a specialty during Ramadan. So the shops that they basically diversify and make them. So they're still having a business and doing them while the shops are closed. They can still sort of sell something, or you'll do the renovation work in your shop, give the shop a really good clean over Ramadan time as well. So yeah.
So does the Christian community, the Christians that might own something like a cafe or a shop, did they, like you said, they might coordinate cleaning or renovations during that time, but in general, are they losing business? Are they sacrificing their business in order to make sure they don't offend or cause strife
Well,
in the community?
um, two of the Christian businesses, well, it's the same shop that I'm thinking about in my mind now, they are actually open. So
Okay.
they are still open. And if you went into Bejala, which is maybe more predominantly Christian, I would imagine that many of those are actually open. You will get some, I think particularly the Muslim shops will close.
Sure.
And you might get some Christian shops that will be closed as well. But I think the Christian community sort of does stay open. And it also depends if they feel like if no one's going to eat, they might say, well, it's not worth it anyways.
Right.
So they may not do it out of pressure, but they might just do it because, well, it's pointless because
Right.
nobody's really eating during the day. We don't have
Right.
big
They'll
enough
take a
Christian
loss
community.
if they
Yeah.
open and
So
cook.
some people will and some people won't. Yeah.
So Paul,
The
it's
police have,
interesting that you
the police have
mentioned.
been, sorry, the police have been out just lately. They give out water and they give out dates. And I know as a church we've done that as well. The Christian community want to bless the Muslim community, so they'll give out a little pack of dates, little bag with one or two dates and some water, and they will give it to the Muslims as well. And I'm not sure. I have a feeling I'm right to say that I think our church prays for Muslims during Ramadan. So they'll actually have a special prayer time where they will be praying for the Muslims during this time. So I'm not sure, but I think that is actually happening at the moment within our church, where they're actually praying for the Muslims, that Muslims will get saved, that as they're fasting, that they will see Jesus at this time. So if not our church is doing that, then I know that there will be other people that will do that for the Muslim community at this time, and then go out and give. I've been out giving out water before in the past during Ramadan, and giving dates as well. So that's one way that the church can actually reach out to the Muslim community and show love and support to them.
Actually, that's beautiful. That's beautiful that this minority community who may feel pressured or oppressed or inconvenienced even will still have the heart to serve their community members.
Yeah.
And that's
So
actually pretty inspiring, I have to say. I was going to ask you one last thing. You mentioned earlier that because it's Ramadan, the checkpoints get really crowded. So there's a system to sort of, as best they can, increase that efficiency to get folks to where they desire to go for their holiday, especially on Friday. And is that an Israeli run? I mean, I'm assuming that's an Israeli run
yeah,
operation. So the Israelis are bending over backwards, so to speak, to make sure that this religious freedom, so to speak, is exercised, and the Muslim community can practice their faith and participate in their holidays. What does that tell us about Israel's mentality in terms of living beside its neighbors and trying to secure themselves while also accommodating their neighbors.
yeah. Well, this is actually for a Friday, so the checkpoint run runs all the time,
Hmm.
but particularly for a Friday when they know that there are so many Muslims that are wanting to leave the Palestinian territories, that they put this on, that they could just leave and say, well, they'll get through whenever they get through. If they miss it, they miss it. If they. But no, they actually make sure that there's enough. They bring in special barriers. So I've seen the lorries that have came in and they brought in special barriers so that they can move people through and have people checked as fast as they can. So that they really are trying to help the Muslim community to get through as fast as they can. Because if you think there's going to be 80,000 people worshipping on top of the Temple Mount, and you're going to get a certain percentage coming from Bethlehem or coming from Ramallah. I only know about the Bethlehem side.
Sure.
So they are putting these things on specially for the Muslim community. So they're serving the Muslim community by trying to get them out of Bethlehem as quickly and as efficiently as possible to get them up there on the Temple Mount. So it says a lot that they care for the Muslim community as well. The Christian community, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, that's all part of Israel in Israel, but this is actually within the Palestinian Authority. So it is showing care for the Palestinians by trying to get the Palestinians through the checkpoint as fast as they can so that they can be up there for Friday prayers at midday. So it's important, and they're doing a really good job with that as well.
It's important that the public knows that because Israel is not Israel, but Israel and its neighbors have a delicate relationship, and they have to balance their security measures and their need to protect the citizens, all the citizens inside Israel proper, while also respecting the religious beliefs of those under the PA. That is often neglected in the news reporting that we see here. So, Paul, we really appreciate you shedding a light on the nuances. Life is not easy. Certainly, no one's saying it's easy, but it's important that as you examine these difficulties and these situations that Christians and Muslims and Jews find themselves in living in Israel, besides Arab neighbors and with Arab neighbors with Arabs inside their community, that as much as possible is being done, and it's not always perfectly executed, but I think that we can say with confidence that the Israeli government is doing its best to manage all these situations, providing accommodations while also providing security. But that perception can sometimes be skewed in the West because we just believe everybody should be free and go here and there and never stand on a line, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. It is about it's freedom and security. If you want to have security, you may not always have the freedom that you want, and that's in anywhere, any part of the world, but it particularly is here. And sadly, we do know that there's a certain group of people who are terrorists and who want to commit acts. We could take the wall down tomorrow if we want. The Bethlehem wall could come down tomorrow if we want. But what would happen? Would we have another October the 7th on our hands? Or
mhm.
would we have everybody wanting to live in peace? And the reality is we could have more terrorist attacks. So it needs to be checked. There are people from Bethlehem who go through the checkpoint every single day to walk to work in Israel. It's not easy. I've had to do it. I left a few weeks ago. I get up at 5:50 in the morning, so I leave my house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't get to school till just about 8:05, and I was late. So I
Wow.
speak in my school. So by the time it takes me 30 minutes to walk to the checkpoint, and then it took me about 40 minutes to get through the checkpoint because the queue was so great, because that's when everybody's wanting to get through at the same time. And the traffic was bad as well. And a combination of everything. I was late by 5 minutes at the end of the day. Nobody likes it. It's frustrating sometimes. It's sometimes frustrating when you're on the Arab bus and then you see the soldiers at the bus stop and you think, oh, they're going to stop us, they're going to pull us over, and they're going to check. And then they spend 10, 15 minutes
Mhm.
going through everybody's passport and everybody's ID. But what they're doing is they're looking for people, you know.
Mhm.
Do you want a bomb to go off today in Jerusalem? Well, if you don't want a bomb to go off today in Jerusalem, then you have to be checked, and we all have to be checked. And it happens to me. It's annoying, but that's the way it is. That's life here in the Holy Land. So it's
Right.
difficult, but we need to pray, particularly for the Christian community, that they stand strong even just during these difficulties that they face.
And I agree. We need to not only pray for the Christian communities, we need to find organizations that are offering support. I believe the Joshua Fund, it does a good job in helping aid through certain channels the Christian community in both under the PA and in Gaza. And I'm just inspired, as you had mentioned, that your church and your Christian community hand out water and dates and pray for their neighbors. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I encourage that, and I want our listeners and network to know about it because we can pray for everybody, those praying for the Muslims, the Christians, and the Muslims as well. So, Paul, thank you for your insights and for clearing things up for us and examining the situation with an objective eye. Nobody's saying life is perfect, but we have to sort of examine the realities and understand the problems and where they come from and why. So we really appreciate that so that we can watch our news here in the West with a critical eye and not rush to judgment to demonize or blame Israel for every ill that's happening in someone's life in that area of the world.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Paul, and you have a great day, and we're looking forward to having you back in a few weeks to update us.
Amen. Welcome. Thank you.
Shavua Tov.
If you enjoy these conversations, please visit us at www.thejerusalemconnection.us. Find all our podcasts on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast program. Follow us on social media, subscribe, like, and share our content to reach the broadest audience.